Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 155 of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Boxing Socials, YouTube channel, wherever you're at, however you're listening, we definitely appreciate it. Jumping right into it, fight reviews this past Saturday, the 27th of November from the Park Theater in Las Vegas, Nevada on Showtime. In a unification matchup for the WBC, WBO, and WBO Super Bantamweight World title, Stephen Fulton gets the narrow majority decision over Brandon Figueroa in a very, very tough fight. I saw most people pick Fulton as the favorite, and it looks like it panned out, but then when the decision was announced, I saw a lot of people who were kind of split. I would say more pundits and fans and media members leaned towards Fulton getting the W, but they weren't necessarily opposed to Figueroa getting the win. What'd you think about it, Mike?
Yeah, it really was, hard to pick. Going into it, I thought Fulton would be just too skillful really for Figueroa, but really, you could have been a draw. It could have been like 1 or 2 rounds to Fulton, 1 or 2 rounds to Figueroa. It really just depended on, what type of work you like to see. Obviously, I think everybody would like to see them kind of run it back because it was so close. But I'm sure Fulton will obviously, go on to bigger and better things and try to, pick up the last remaining belts in that division. But a good fight, though. I don't think really it's one of those fights where no one really came out a loser. Figueroa technically lost, but it was that close that I think that he hasn't really dropped down the pecking order. And, I think they should really maybe revisit it later down the line. It was, a really good fight. I think Fulton was just I think his counterattacks just really won it for me. I thought he was well placed. Figueroa kind of throws a lot of punches, which kind of attracts your eye a lot and makes you think that maybe he's won the round. But I think Fulton maybe just is a little bit heavier handed, places his shots a little bit better, where Figueroa just kind of comes into range and just says just throws as many punches as he can. Whereas I think Fulton, just places him technically better.
Yeah, I agree. I think Fulton did land the cleaner shots. I would dare to say that Figueroa was a lot more busier. He looked busier, especially on TV and ringside. But they each landed their own respective shots, and they each, had moments throughout the fight. It was an excellent fight. And like you said, I think we would love to see a rematch. I don't think we're gonna end up seeing it right away anytime soon. I think Fulton is going to try to move on now that he has 2 world titles under his belt. Who else is at super bantamweight? And also just to mention what the scores were 114, and then 116, 112 twice for Fulton, who is now, as I mentioned, the WBC and WBO super bantamweight world champion. Who else is at super bantamweight? Is Ronnie Rios at super bantamweight from Golden Boy?
Mm-hmm. You're looking at MJ Akhmadaliev. If he wants to sweep up the rest of the division,
that's right.
It would be a unification between those two. I think obviously at the minute MJ probably still has the rearranged fight with Ronnie Rios, and then after that, hopefully in 2022 we can find another undisputed. It was so unusual. We'd had one in how many years, and then over the last 2 years we've had we're on to 4 or 5, depending on if you count Teofimo Lopez and obviously now George Kambosos as undisputed or not, depending on whether you class their WBC or Haney's WBC as undisputed.
Who would you favor in MJ and Ronnie Rios fight? Because obviously that's been rescheduled. They were supposed to fight, and then Ronnie Rios, I think, got COVID, right? Was that the matchup? Yeah. That was right there at the Honda Center, the fight we attended. Who would you tip the scale to in terms of that fight? Akhmadaliev or Ronnie Rios?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go with MJ, Akhmadaliev. I think he's just, very skillful. He didn't look too great in his last match. He got caught a lot by the standing opponent.
Right.
I think his style, his movement would be a little bit too much for Ronnie, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm tending to agree with you, but I don't know. You can never count Ronnie Rios out. Him and his brother Lex. I mean, look at when Ronnie Rios went up against Diego De La Hoya at the StubHub Center out here in LA in Carson, California. Diego De La Hoya went in as a favorite, and look at what happened. Look at what the outcome was. Ronnie Rios ended up taking the W, and he's had the momentum going forward. Either way, like you mentioned, hopefully we get another undisputed fight in 2022. Like you said, we haven't had too many in the history of boxing. And in the last couple of years, we've already had multiple undisputed fights. And if we have another one in 2022 in regards to, Fulton and facing off against the winner of, Ronnie Rios and MJ, aren't we missing a title? Does anybody else have a title?
MJ has two.
MJ. So MJ does have two.
Yeah, WBA and IBF, and then
okay, that's what I thought.
I know that Danny Roman has been, very vocal about trying to get the winner of the Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. I don't think it's been called officially, but that would always be an interesting fight because, as we've said many times before, I always seem to count against Danny Roman, but he always seems to find a way, apart from when he fought MJ before people correct me. Obviously, he didn't beat him. But, he always finds a way to win, just that body punching, very methodical, very tactical, and it always seems to work for him.
Well, it's just like how we talked about last week with Boxing Scene's Keith Idek in relation to Brandon Figueroa. Brandon Figueroa was counted out a lot in terms of being the underdog in a lot of his fights, especially his most recent fights. And even Keith Idek had mentioned, I usually pick against Brandon Figueroa, and he always ends up winning and proving me wrong. Danny Roman, would you say Danny Roman is the same to you in that regard? Like, he has a talent and he could win, but when you break it down and when you're analyzing the fight, whoever his opponent is, you normally pick against him. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think at times when you look at him, and I also used to do it with Josh Warrington, when somebody doesn't do something outstandingly well, but they do everything kind of, good, like sevens across the board, but they don't do that something amazing. They haven't got amazing power or amazing footwork or something that really stands out. Maybe you just kind of count against them.
Right.
Both of those two I've gone against so many times and been proven wrong.
Right. Either way, as we mentioned from the beginning of this fight, this was an excellent fight. Obviously, the fans and the media would love to see a rematch. I think Brandon Figueroa definitely deserves a rematch. I don't think he'll get it realistically immediately, but I think Fulton's going to move on. Who knows? Danny Roman might get a shot at Fulton.
I saw it all over social media. Nothing's official, but
he was at the fight. He was at the fight, wasn't he?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's highly likely that he could be made some type of mandatory or some type of deal could be struck with Fulton. You never know. And then, like we mentioned earlier, the hopeful path is the road to undisputed at 122 pounds. So the winner, maybe Fulton, possibly Fulton, at least at this point, goes up against MJ or Ronnie Rios sometime in 2022, maybe the later part of 2022. So about a year from now. That's the hopeful pathway. And I don't see why it can't be done, right?
Wrong side of the street.
Well,
is the only thing that I could imagine, Fulton being over with, PBC, Showtime. MJ, obviously over with DAZN, Matchroom. Danny Roman, I think, is actually he was DAZN, wasn't he? But now he's PBC. So you could see you could see the Fulton Danny Roman being made, fairly easily. And then obviously, will PBC do the usual, keep it in house and just try to cut out MJ? And unfortunately, we're stuck in that usual position of just wanting fights that just unfortunately can't be made.
In-house fights, every promoter is guilty of that, and we just have to live with it at certain times. Moving on, also this past Saturday from the Madison Square Garden Hulu Theater in New York City on DAZN for the for the unified lightweight world titles. George Kambosos Jr. upsets Teofimo Lopez in a split decision victory, and Kambosos Jr. is now the unified, not undisputed, to me, it's unified lightweight champion of the world at 135 pounds. A lot of people counted him out leading up to it. I mean, do you think that, okay, when he knocked him down in the first round, what was your reaction? When Kambosos, because Lopez, as we talked about in last week's episode, Lopez had mentioned in numerous interviews, and his dad had mentioned in numerous interviews, that he wanted the first round knockout. Lopez he was very confident, but he also was going through some personal things, obviously, that we've learned a lot more since the conclusion of the fight. But what was your reaction when Lopez went down from that overhand right from Kambosos Jr. in that very first round?
I think I was like everybody else, pretty shocked. And then after a while, you kept watching. You could just kind of see that, Lopez came in. He looked like he didn't really respect Kambosos, and then he got dropped. And, he just kept throwing one shots. He had his hands down really, really low. And it looked like that, he fully believed, like, I'm going to take you out and it's going to be early. And he was just throwing those, one-hitter quitters, as people say, and wasn't boxing. And then eventually, after a few rounds, you could see that he was kind of like, okay, like, I'm not going to get Kambosos out of here. And then he was kind of playing catch-up. I think it's been, talked about enough. The corner work was atrocious. His dad just kept giving him really no advice, just sort of saying, like, get him out of here. And then his cut man wasn't really doing a good job. At times he was looking like a bit of a butcher, like he was coming back in from the minute in the corner and he was still bleeding. But, giving all respect to Kambosos, he came in looking really, really good. I think the fact that he was called, ferocious Kambosos, we all just thought that he was a bit of a slugger. And he definitely wasn't. His footwork was brilliant. Game plan was brilliant. His head work and his defense was brilliant. Unbelievable performance from him, really. And I think, we should really give credit to him instead of kind of saying, what Lopez didn't do. Was it the fact that Kambosos' game plan was so good that made, Lopez look so bad? And then afterwards as well, like all the media that he's done since the fight, unbelievable. He kind of understands, the way to be a champion. He's done, like, even the smallest people on Twitter and Instagram, that really have really small followings. He was giving them 15, 20-minute interviews with everybody. And good for him. Everyone counted against him. I think he was as high as like 11-1 underdog to win that fight. And, the interviews with his dad spoke really well, saying about how many people, friends, family, sponsors that had won money on him. And, I think he should get a voluntary, defense against somebody. And then move on. Yeah, I mean, you've got to give it to people like that, And I think a lot of people are thinking he's a soft touch because when he won it, how many people called him out?
Yeah,
Haney, Garcia.
That's the first thing I thought of. It's just like, well, he just beat Teofimo Lopez, the guy that none of you were really calling out, essentially.
Who beat Lomachenko that nobody wanted. Yeah.
And now you're going to call out the guy who's beaten the guy who's beating the guy.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's also maybe like because Kambosos he doesn't really have an exclusive agreement with any one promoter, does he?
No, he was kind of promoted by Matchroom for a little while, and then reading between the lines. Well, not reading between the lines as such. When in a couple of interviews with the father, he literally spoke about working with Matchroom for fights in Australia. So I'm assuming they have a really good relationship. He isn't actually signed to anybody, but his dad was, pretty much saying that that's like what they were going to do. And obviously Lou DiBella's worked with Eddie Hearn, how many times.
No, right. I mean, that's true. So Lou DiBella is technically his promoter, but Lou DiBella is not really tied to any one major promoter. And I mean, look at who called them out, who made the most noise: Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, who are DAZN fighters at the moment. And they see, and then De La Hoya even put it out there. I think he tweeted something about, Ryan Garcia would beat or would, should fight George Kambosos. That was all planned. I mean, obviously to these promoters like Oscar De La Hoya or even Devin Haney, who also has his own promotional company, we can't forget about that. They saw, okay, new champ. He's not aligned to any one broadcast partner or one major promoter. It's easier to make the fight with him. With somebody like George Kambosos, who now has most of the titles at 135 pounds, there's essentially no sides of the street with him because he's kind of like a free agent in a sense. So it just depends. I mean, I was really surprised that when he knocked him down in the first round, I was very surprised. And but you could see like Lopez was trying to get that first round knockout. He seemed so determined, likely because he kept reiterating that fact in interviews. First round knockout, especially his dad. His dad was also, blowing the horn on that too. And I feel like he tried so hard to get that and to make that happen, to create that outcome, that he got caught. And he never really found a rhythm. I mean, he got a knockdown, I believe, in the 10th round to Kambosos, but it was a knockdown, but it wasn't the same type of impact knockdown that Kambosos got Lopez in the first round. It was a great fight. I was entertained by it. It was a very entertaining fight. Lopez was obviously upset at the end. He felt he won the fight. It was kind of interesting because when he got there, he was a favorite for the crowd. The crowd was cheering him. But by the end of the fight, they were booing him. And it looks like they essentially booed him because he didn't give the credit to George Kambosos Jr. But, I mean, what a fight. What a fight. I mean, and look at DAZN and Eddie Hearn. They lucked out. They were able to get that fight and broadcast it. After the whole debacle with Triller and rescheduling it multiple times, like 6 or 7 or 8 times. And then they defaulted with the IBF and what have you. And then Triller goes away and Eddie Hearn and DAZN pick it up since they had the second highest bid. It was an entertaining fight. I would love to see it again. It looks like Kambosos Jr. was open to it, but Lopez has already maintained following that fight that he can no longer make 135 pounds, so he's going to 140. So I think this is the last we've seen of Teofimo Lopez at 135 pounds. And he's moving up to 140. And let's just see what he does there. Don't be surprised if Pedraza's fighting Ramirez. So Top Rank is going to try to make a fight between Lopez and Ramirez probably within the next year or so, I'm assuming, maybe in the next 2 years at least. But it was also interesting. I don't know if you saw the interview before you give your take. Teofimo Lopez Sr. was giving an interview after the fight to Seconds Out, Radio Raheem. And it was very odd because he was touching on the fact now we can't say that we're better than Floyd Mayweather, because we got that one loss. Floyd's going to say, oh, well, you have a loss. I don't understand why they're so. I understand a lot of fighters and young fighters and, especially the young fighters, they look up to somebody like Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, because that was their era. They grew up watching those types of fighters. So you want to emulate them in terms of their career, in terms of, the money they draw, the ratings, how they fight, the excellency in their boxing skills. But it was so odd to see that he he stressed that for his son. He's like, now we can't say we're better than Floyd Mayweather. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm fairly sure that Floyd Mayweather isn't sitting there saying, oh, this kid Teofimo Lopez is catching up to my legacy. I don't think that's happening. But I mean, they have a goal, but because he said that in that interview, obviously that affects them, which is very, very interesting. And then his dad was then talking crap about DAZN, saying we should have never left ESPN and Top Rank. Top Rank are the people who love us. DAZN pretty much sold us out. I don't know. I don't think he said that exactly, but pretty much saying we should have stayed with Top Rank and ESPN. They're the ones who love us. When they were the ones talking crap about them during the last year, that they didn't want to get, that Top Rank and ESPN didn't want to pay them. And now because they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, they're saying, oh, we're, forget DAZN. We're going back to Top Rank and ESPN, after somebody like Bob Arum has already talked negatively about that fight. Like, oh yeah, they made the third lowest bid in that purse bid. His own promoter. It was Top Rank in third place, Matchroom in second, and then Triller in first. If that doesn't really tell you, and they wanted money. I mean, they thought Eddie Hearn was like, oh, we can pay you. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to make multi-million dollars. And then his dad also said in that interview with Radio Raheem that we're going to go back to ESPN. We're going to have 2 pay-per-view fights and then 1 regular ESPN fight at 140 pounds. That's very, very interesting to hear. I mean, they have the mentality. They still have the mentality that I think the kid can come back and regroup. I really can. He's young enough, as long as all the personal problems that he's going through, as long as he can kind of get a hold and a control of his life in terms of his personal matters. Because I think him and his wife, who he just had a baby with, I think they split up. So I'm sure that wasn't easy. That was on his mind and some other stuff. And, it seems like I feel like he's Jojo Diaz 2.0. Because remember, Jojo Diaz kind of went through the same thing last year after he won his first title in February of 2020. He met a girl. They got together. He was really happy, had a baby. I think that relationship also didn't end up working out, and Jojo Diaz aired out his grievances on Twitter and on social media a lot. I mean, anybody can go see that. He posted a lot of things behind his personal life. And, and then he missed weight, so he lost his belt on the scale. I mean, I feel like Teofimo Lopez is in that same path. They were on such a high, and, they try to embrace all this lifestyle, all this money and everything. They try to do all this that they felt they could do in terms to elevate their lifestyle. And, they hit a brick wall, and, it's affected their health and their mentality. But I mean, what do you think? And, do you agree that the whole Jojo Diaz, Teofimo Lopez maybe have similar pathways right now in terms of how their lives have turned out?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot there. I would definitely agree with that. Very similar in terms of, Jojo Diaz, was briefly with, Joe Diaz as his coach when he won the IBF title. Obviously, Teofimo was briefly kind of working alongside Joe Gamache. And then obviously he went back to his father, same as Teo did. And obviously, having the child and the girlfriend and, going through all that. And then, Teofimo being very young, pretty much kind of, you're living your life on social media. When you become as big as he did, as fast as he did, in the boxing world. And then touching on, moving up to 140, he's kind of actually in the best place in terms of the promotion, because you've got Pedraza, Zepeda, Jose Ramirez, Josh Taylor, all 140. So, and pretty much all of those would be really good matches as well. Zepeda, me and you are big fans of Zepeda.
I think Zepeda-Lopez fight would actually be an excellent fight.
Zepeda might beat him, actually.
Yeah, you know what? I'm leaning towards Zepeda.
If it's anything like that performance, then Zepeda would touch him up, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think Zepeda would be the favorite in that potential matchup.
Yeah, I think now Josh Taylor's kind of like, it was kind of very respectful of him. He didn't kick him whilst he was down, and I think now Teofimo's hype it's not gone, but it's not what it was, obviously. I don't know whether he'd want to, stay around at 140 to fight him. I think, Josh Taylor's probably going to go up to 147, fight Crawford.
Taylor's a big guy for 142. He's a tall, big guy.
I think you were probably right. I think Pedraza, Top Rank, do kind of use him now as...
Yeah, but he's fighting Ramirez in February, right?
Yeah, I think Ramirez will probably beat him, and then I think I could see Teofimo coming back and fighting someone like Pedraza.
But he won't fight Pedraza. They Top Rank would... I mean, who knows? Maybe they've been using Pedraza as the sacrificial lamb for a lot of things.
That's why I kind of thought it would kind of suit. Because like you said, he's become kind of like their gatekeeper to see, is this person ready for the top? Right. the top part of that division. They kind of throw him in with Pedraza, and they either sink or swim, because Pedraza on his day can be good.
Yeah,
we've seen him in some good performances before from Pedraza. But then the biggest thing for me I wanted to touch on is, him and his dad. He's had a lot of negative things to say about him. In terms of his performance in the ring, and then obviously Teofimo posted yesterday, a picture of him and his dad, we're in this together until the wheels fall off. And if he's going to become what he can, the potential that we've seen. And I know obviously it's just one loss. They did beat Lomachenko, but the performance in the corner was terrible, that bad. It wasn't okay, he's lost one fight, but he was in there and what he was telling him was good, and the advice was there. There wasn't any advice. It was just get him out of there. There was nothing tactical about it. And then he would keep telling him different things hey, slow down. And then 10 seconds later, just get him out of there. You're like, well, that's two different things. So, I think he should maybe take a step back and, maybe let his dad be a second or something like that. Or just let him be in the corner, but, really go with someone who is, a full-time trainer.
Let me ask you this. You let me know what you think. Do you think Kambosos essentially trained for this fight how Teofimo Lopez trained for the Lomachenko fight?
Yeah, I mean, he's had that long. I think he probably sat there and looked at tape. Just some of the stuff he said, I think, as well in the interviews afterwards. That knockdown in the first round, when he kind of spoke about that, how he would he'd drop back, and then I think Teofimo Lopez thought he was going to drop back again. He'd come in with a jab, and then boom, he came over with the right hand and caught him. That looked like they trained on that all day.
That was a sweet setup. Setup.
And he kept doing that thing where he'd come off to the left-hand side the whole time. And Teofimo, that was there all day. Teofimo just was completely lost by that.
Right.
He just didn't know what to do, and he kept touching him up with that all the time. You just don't know. Was it just an unbelievably tactical performance from Kambosos, or was it just everything you touched on? And Lopez just came in there and was, because there's just a shell of himself. Because that performance against Lomachenko was unbelievable, and then the performance against Comey was good, and then that performance was just.
I think if he bought into his own hype, and he got paid, 1.2, 1.3 million for the Lomachenko fight, and supposedly I think Teofimo Lopez had mentioned that he was down to his last $20,000 when you made over $1 million. But then I think there was reports that when he got married, he went on a honeymoon for 3 months somewhere.
Yeah, he bought a house in somewhere in the middle of the country, because he moved from New York and he was training at the house
that
he bought with his wife, and what I read was he spent $250,000 on this training camp for the Kambosos fight.
Right. So I mean, if all that stuff is true, and he was down to his last $20,000, I think he said he was down to that figure before he got his sponsorship money from Bud Light, that's a very big deal. A Bud Light sponsorship, that's very huge. That was big news. But before he got that sponsorship money and all that, he was down to the $20K. If that's true, if he's just saying that for publicity or to make everything a little bit more intriguing, that it is what it is. But if that's accurate, that's scary. That's very scary. When you made one, obviously there's taxes and all that stuff, and he had to pay his team. And I know for Lomachenko, he had utilized this nutrition company called Perfecting Athletes, which helped him with the weight cut. And he didn't use that company this time.
They dropped him.
Did they drop him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know they dropped him. I just know that he didn't utilize them.
No, I believe the rumor was they dropped him. I think it was some arguments.
Oh wow! See, I didn't know that. I just know that he didn't utilize them this time, which was like they're like a nutrition company that help you with the weight cut and food and all that stuff. They're pretty pricey from what I've seen, from what I've heard, but they work pretty well and they help you really prepare for a fight as best as you can. And like you said, like you mentioned earlier, he didn't have that assistant trainer in his ear, Joey Gamache. He just had his dad, where Joey was there during the Lomachenko fight. And Joey is a very reputable trainer. He knows his stuff, and like you said, kind of rewinding a little bit, reiterating, Teofimo Lopez Sr. kind of seemed like he was just throwing stuff out there. Just get him out of there. You got to slow down. Get him out of there. It's just like, well, what kind of advice is that? It's so general. It's so broad, like this is his first title defense of his multiple lightweight world titles. We already kind of knew. It's not surprising that they both have mentioned that he's going to move up to 140 pounds. Before the Lomachenko fight, they were already saying that he was having a tough time making 135.
Yeah, but they were saying that
like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think we were still in the recording studio before COVID when we were chatting about this.
Right. So, I think he just, because he won the titles, he's like, okay, I at least got to defend them one time. So he forced himself to make 135 again. But the plan was always win or lose. I think he always knew, okay, I can, if I win, then I can just say, oh yeah, I'm undisputed or whatever. I'm unified at 135 pounds. Now I'm going to 140 to get all the big dogs there. Either way, win or lose, he was going to move up. His body's just growing. He's getting older. He just can't make it. That's what happens in boxing. And then touching on Kambosos again, Kambosos is on top of the world. He hit the lottery. He hit the lottery because now everybody's calling him out. And his payday just went up. So, like you said, he most likely will probably get a voluntary in Australia, in one of their big stadiums, like in, maybe the same stadium where Jeff Horn and Manny Pacquiao fought.
Which was the biggest shock?
To me?
Jeff Horn beating Pacquiao or Kambosos beating Teofimo?
Jeff Horn beating Pacquiao. Because I watched that fight, and I still don't understand how people give it to Jeff Horn. I really don't. I know some people after a while are like, oh yeah, I could see it. I could agree with that. Like, I still don't agree with that. I'm on the same boat as Tim Bradley was on that day when Tim Bradley called him out to his face. Jeff Horn was on the side of the ring in that little post-fight interview with the belt over his shoulder, and Tim Bradley's just like, I don't believe you won this fight. And he just looks at him like, oh, okay. Like I was more shocked by that. But it's not to say this wasn't a shock in and of itself. This was huge too. And I think one thing we glossed over, there's no rematch clause.
Yeah, because it's mandatory.
Because Kambosos was a mandatory, But even then, even if you're a mandatory, we've talked to several people in the boxing business that say, even if you're a mandatory, we can still get a rematch clause in.
That's what AJ did with Usyk.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have the power, you can still get it in, but obviously it didn't work this time. There was no rematch clause. But I don't think it matters anyways. I think that's how, I think that indicates Lopez's future plans already. He's like, okay, well, why do we need a rematch clause when I know I'm not going to stay at the weight anyways? I'm going up to 140. So he's going up to 140. Let's see how he does. I think throwing him in there with, like you said, Zepeda, Ramirez. If Taylor stays there, which he probably won't, he'll probably move up.
Arnold Barboza.
Barboza's there. Yeah, Barboza's at 140. That's, I think he kind of threw his name in the mix too. He was tweeting about that fight, or if Lopez moves up to 140 or whatever. It's a good setup there. There's a good little round robin you can have of fights there. So, and then Kambosos, him beating the guy who beat the guy. He's also the Ring Magazine champion as well. We forgot to mention that. So now you got like Ryan Garcia, George Kambosos, Devin Haney, JoJo Diaz, Tank Davis, Lomachenko. You still got a deep, deep class of popular, high-level lightweights at 135 pounds there. You really do.
Do you think we touched on obviously Kambosos not having any TV deal, any promotional deal apart from Luke DiBella? Do you think that Floyd, Leonard Ellaby, Espinoza get together and they're like, hey, we can take Kambosos. Let's just pay over the odds and get all those belts on Showtime?
They'd be smart. You don't think that all these promoters at this moment, now that Kambosos has won, you don't think they're going to approach him and say, hey, come to us? Because they want all those belts. Mm-hmm. Imagine, honestly, if I was Floyd Mayweather, Al Heyman and Leonard Ellerbe and all them, if Tank Davis, which we'll touch on his fight in a few minutes, he's fighting this upcoming Sunday at the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles against Isaac Cruz. If Tank Davis wins on Sunday, which he's likely to win, he's the favorite, he should win. If I was Floyd Mayweather, PBC, Showtime, Steven Espinoza, I would definitely make an offer to George Kambosos. Why not? Why not? Like, oh yeah, Tank Davis. Yeah, let's get him in there with him. Let's make a unification matchup.
We do good numbers.
It would do great numbers because Davis has already shown that he gets ratings. He really has. Whether people like it or not. And that's what Mayweather Promotions cares more about than they really do titles, is they care that Davis is a star and that he draws money. That's their world title. Obviously, fighters want to be that. They want to be a draw because it increases their paycheck. But Mayweather Promotions, Leonard Ellerbe, Floyd Mayweather, they're not shy about saying, yeah, Tank Davis is a star. He doesn't need any world titles. People come out to see him. He sells out arenas. I mean, I think it'd be a very idiotic decision not to pursue George Kambosos and offer him money. It's like, I mean, you talked about Jeff Horn and Manny Pacquiao. Everybody knew when Jeff Horn got the, in quotation marks, the win over Manny Pacquiao, everybody knew that Top Rank's plan was to feed him to Terence Crawford. Jeff Horn got a voluntary defense in Australia, got some people out there, and then in his next fight in Las Vegas, fought Terence Crawford and lost. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew the expected future plan once Jeff Horn won that fight. Everybody knew. I'm telling you, if Espinoza and Showtime and Mayweather Promotions can make an offer to Kambosos and have Kambosos come fight on Showtime pay-per-view against Tank Davis, and Tank Davis ends up winning and gets all those titles, what a turn of events. How the turntables. What do you think? Is that realistic? You think it'll happen? They better make an offer. I'm telling you right now, they better.
I think so. I think, all the people that, that have a chance of fighting him, Haney, Davis, they're all hard fights for Kambosos. Even after that performance, I don't think he necessarily goes in as a favorite, to be honest with you. So I would, if I was him, I would just take, the biggest money. Have a nice voluntary over in Australia, and then, take the Davis fight, which will probably be the biggest pot of money because of the amount of money that Showtime have. And not cash out, but,
right.
It's a risk. They're all risky. So why not take the most money, for the highest? It's probably the riskiest fight actually out of all of them, fighting Davis.
Yeah, I think Davis, it's Davis and Lomachenko who are on top of that.
Yeah.
On top of that class at 135 pounds. Easily. I don't think anybody should dispute that.
That's why they fight. They fight for money.
Right.
So why not take the biggest pot of money, which I think will be Gervonta Davis on Showtime?
Oh yeah. I think everybody knows that Gervonta Davis is a cash cow at 135 pounds. Even at 130 pounds. I mean, maybe 142. Yeah. I mean, I think that it seemed like George Kambosos and his team are very, very grateful to DAZN and Eddie Hearn. So I think that they will be working, if you ask me, unless Showtime offers him a boatload of money, I think he's going to work with Eddie Hearn and DAZN, who will also pay him pretty handsomely and they'll give him one voluntary defense in Australia on the zone. And then Eddie Hearn is going to try to make the Devin Haney fight, assuming Devin Haney beats Jojo Diaz. And if for some reason Jojo Diaz wins on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, against Devin Haney, I mean, there's obviously going to be a rematch, but let's just say Jojo Diaz wins a rematch as well. Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya are going to try to make George Kambosos and Jojo Diaz. I'm telling you, there's so many potential outcomes here at 135 pounds. It's made everything a lot more intriguing, a lot more exciting at this weight class. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Everybody was already excited when Teofimo Lopez defeated Lomachenko, who was the man, arguably the pound-for-pound fighter in the world in that weight class. But now, with Kambosos getting the upset win over Lopez, and Jojo Diaz and Devin Haney fighting on Saturday, and then Gervonta Davis fighting on Sunday, you got a majority of the lightweights at 135 pounds who are fighting in the span of a week or so. You know, this is great. This is great because they're all kind of on the same schedule right now. It's just who comes out on top, you know. But Kambosos, man, kind of going back to him. Congratulations to him and his team on the win. He's obviously very excited, like you mentioned. I think we give him a lot of credit, especially us as media who have a lot of guests on and a lot of fighters, a lot of personalities, a lot of writers, promoters, and stuff like that. We give a lot of credit to George Kambosos for doing a lot of media after his win. He did a lot of YouTube media. He spoke to a lot of writers. That was excellent. I think Marcos Villegas of Fight Hub TV had tweeted. There was a couple people who tweeted, but I saw his tweet where he kind of gave credit to Kambosos as well, saying this is great how he's doing so much media after such a big win. It's great for his profile. It's great for publicity. It can only help. So, yeah, Kambosos is the top dog right now in terms of the titles, you know, at least in terms of like people are after him now. I think everybody has a good spot right now in the lightweight division, except Ryan Garcia. He needs to get a fight. You know, he's not going to get Kambosos right away. You know, he needs to first jump in there and get a fight and fight somebody. But yeah, what a would you say upset of the year for this fight?
Oh, so there's been a few, haven't they? It just might be. I think everybody was overlooking him, especially when you looked at the betting odds as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because of the fact that he was unified or undisputed, however you want to look at it. Yeah, in terms of prestige and maybe even the ease of it made it even more shocking.
Right.
Because he kind of schooled him. It wasn't just like a lucky one punch that knocked him out.
It was a nice setup.
Yeah, you know, he knocked him down, and then for the next 11 rounds, you know, he kind of had him under control. Really, at times, you know, Teofimo only really won, you know, like maybe a handful of rounds.
Yeah, it was still a close fight, even though Lopez, you know, lost. Like I think it was still a very entertaining fight. Lopez had his moments, but yeah, I agree with the decision. I think Kambosos deserved the win. So we'll see how going forward how each of their respective career pathways show up going forward into 2022. Moving on that fight card, Kenichi Ogawa gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Azinga Fusile. How'd you say it again before we went on air?
I think it's Fusili. I could be completely wrong, but that's
we're hoping that's right. One of those pronunciations, we're hoping one of those is right. Ogawa is now the IBF Super Featherweight World Champion. What do you think about this matchup?
Good matchup. Obviously, Ogawa actually was a substitute for Shavkat Rakhimov.
Right.
And he came in and took it. You know, I was there when Ogawa actually won the IBF the first time when he beat Tevin Farmer years ago, but actually popped for steroids and then the belt ended up becoming vacant, and Tevin Farmer won it later down the line. Good performance from him. He really just comes in and kind of just throws a lot of punches, like overwhelms people really with his fitness. And then, going from there, going forward, it's a good division. It's kind of surprising that these two were really kind of, the top two for the vacant IBF in the super featherweight division. You think there would have been some bigger names, right? But the IBF are kind of consistent, where you kind of...
They're the most consistent.
Yeah, true. Yeah, they are the most consistent, that if you keep winning and fighting under their titles, that you will eventually get a shot. So you really have to respect that.
Right. Moving on, fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 4th of December, from the Copper Box Arena in London on BT Sport. Lyndon Arthur, 19-0, goes up against Anthony Yarde, 21-2. What do you think about this matchup?
Great matchup. Obviously, this is a rematch from when they fought during COVID. I'm trying to think when it was. The start of the year? Was it the start of this year that they fought? When Lyndon Arthur came in and kind of really shocked a lot of people. I think obviously Anthony Yarde had the better pedigree in some respects, because he'd obviously fought, Kovalev for the WBO title in August 2019. So, I think people thought that he was going to go in there and, beat Lyndon Arthur, who hadn't really got, anywhere above, British or Commonwealth level. But in my opinion, I always thought Yarde had really fought nobody. He just fought a load of nobodies up until, skipping the domestic scene, and then just scoring a lot of points, getting a high ranking with the WBO.
I don't know why I said Joe Joyce. That was
Daniel Dubois.
Yeah, right.
And then obviously fighting, Lyndon Arthur, it showed that maybe the reason that he decided to skip the British and Commonwealth level was because he wasn't really good enough. I'm hoping that, he kind of comes in, puts a little bit more effort in, because to me, he's kind of all show. He throws a few punches and then just stand backs, kind of admires his work a little bit. And then obviously he's got, Tunjay Jai in the corner, which really stirs up more problems than he kind of solves, to be honest with you. He's one of those trainers that really wants the limelight more than the fighter. And I think Anthony Yarde really should have stepped away and found somebody else. Because when you see Anthony Yarde actually interviewed, by himself, he's actually, intelligent, speaks really well. Right. And then when he's kind of around like Tundi, there's all that, lions in the camp, and all that sort of stuff. And
like Charlo.
Yeah, he doesn't really need that sort of thing. But he decided to stay with Tundi, and, only time will tell. We'll see this weekend whether he's learned from that performance, because Lyndon Arthur really controlled him just with a jab for the 12 rounds, really won quite convincingly. Right.
I'm looking forward to this matchup. I think I'm hoping it lives up to my expectation.
Be a nice early morning fight for us. It's actually on BT Sport, and it's on ESPN Plus, I believe.
Exactly.
For us over here, yeah.
Gives us some early morning fights to look forward to. Have some breakfast, some coffee over here in the United States, and watch some good boxing. Saturday is going to be a good, pretty decent day of boxing all over the world here. Running off that card, Hamza Shiraz, 13-0, goes up against Bradley Skeet. This is for the WBO European Super Welterweight title. What a mouthful that is. And also this upcoming weekend as well, this upcoming Saturday, the 4th of December, from the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, once again for the WBC Lightweight World title. Devin Haney, 26-0, goes up against Jojo Diaz, 32-1-1. As we know, as our listeners know, as boxing fans know, Jojo Diaz was originally supposed to fight Ryan Garcia with a couple months ago, but then Ryan Garcia had to pull out of the fight for some personal reasons, and then there was a lot of banging the drum for Jojo Diaz and Devin Haney to go after each other, and then they started going after on Twitter, and they made the fight. How often do we see that? In this day and age, in the modern day and age of social media technology, when these fighters are going after each other on social media saying, oh yeah, I'll take you, or send the contract or something. These guys, Jojo Diaz and Devin Haney, Golden Boy and Matchroom respectively, actually followed through with it. They followed through with it and made this fight. Do you think Do you think this is a more competitive fight than Jojo Diaz, Ryan Garcia would have been?
That's a good question. More competitive fight than, yeah,
right?
Yeah, just because you don't know what you're going to get with Ryan. Ryan, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what headspace he's going to be in. Where I think Devin Haney would be a little bit more consistent. He can be boring at times. Obviously, he tried to get over that, tried to get around that when he fought Linares and ended up getting caught because I think he wanted to please his home fans when he fought in Las Vegas and, was actually rocked a little bit in those last few rounds when he fought Linares. And it'd be interesting to see what type of style he goes in with when he fights, Joseph Diaz. Interesting fight, really, because I think it will probably go 12 rounds, neither of them being a huge, huge puncher. Very similar in terms of style. Devin Haney may be a little bit more in and out. Jojo kind of likes to work on the inside. That's the inside to middle range, where I think at times Devin Haney likes to kind of like jump in, throw a few combinations and get, back out of range. So it's going to be a good clash of styles and to see who comes out on top. Diaz probably has the more experience, because he was actually, an Olympian. Devin, though, has probably had the better sparring, been in and around Las Vegas, because, Diaz around here, you don't really ever see him in with any of the big names, do you? He's kind of more in with the local kids and stuff like that. But, he's, been around, some great fighters, when he was on the Team USA. But, yeah, he's another one that actually surprises us. You could probably add to that list with, Warrington, Danny Roman, and also Jojo Diaz. How many times have we said that he kind of fails to deliver? He's definitely, in my opinion, one of those fighters that fights up or down to the level of his opponent.
Right. I agree with that. I think we've touched on that same sentiment in past episodes about Jojo Diaz. I think this is call me crazy, but I don't know. I mean, don't even call me crazy. I think this is a closely even matchup. Like you said, none of them are really knockout artists. They have great boxing ability. Joseph Diaz Jr. was on the Olympic team. He's arguably fought the better competition up until this point in both of their careers. But Devin Haney has the title, even though he didn't technically win it. And Devin Haney obviously has shown, he passes the eye test. He's a good fighter. I think this is a close fight. I think this is a very close fight. It's hard for me to really pick who's going to win. I really don't know. I really don't know.
Diaz has been looking better since he's gone up in the weights. I think.
I see. I don't know. I feel like the last couple of days I've leaned towards one, and then I think about it more, and I lean towards the other. If you're asking me right now, as of this moment when we're recording this week's episode, I'm leaning towards Jojo Diaz.
I'm still waiting. When you hear from people like Zab Judah, a lot of the guys, a lot of the professionals that have been in and around, all of the big gyms, been in and around like Mayweather's gym and all the big gyms in Las Vegas, and they all say that Devin Haney is the truth. He is that good. And I sit there and I think we need to see it. When's it going to come out? When's Devin Haney's Shakur Stevenson's performance? After that performance against Jamal Herring, we were okay. Shakur's the real deal. In my opinion, we're still waiting for that from Devin Haney because he didn't have it against Linares.
Right. But it's also, can you really blame Haney? He's kind of been ostracized in the 135-pound division. He hasn't really been able to get a significant name since he's gotten that belt at 135 pounds. This is his first, I would say, legitimate opponent in terms of the credit that he would get. If he can beat Jojo Diaz, I think a lot of people are going to give him credit, which I would be one of them.
Yeah, because I would agree with that because Jojo Diaz is probably in his prime, right? When he fought Linares and he fought Gamboa, they're on the other side of the hill. They're coming down the hill. They're kind of cashing out as the gatekeeper. They're selling their name.
Right. So, I think it's a good matchup. Eddie Hearn has mentioned in multiple interviews over the last couple of years that he's tried to get Devin Haney to, marquee matchups. Supposedly, he said it. I know Leonard Ellerbe and Mayweather Promotions have said that when Rolly Romero was replaced, I think Eddie Hearn, or I don't know if it was Devin Haney or somebody from that team, had mentioned that they made an offer to Mayweather to have Devin Haney replace Rolly Romero, and then Leonard Ellerbe got upset at the question and said nothing was made. And obviously we hear that multiple times from promoters, like, oh, there was no offer, no contract was ever sent, or it's not real, and they get all upset.
Fuck Eddie Hearn.
Yeah, I was on that call. I was on that Zoom call for that Gervonta Davis, Esau Cruz Zoom kickoff press conference. So I was there watching that feed. But like I mentioned, this is a great matchup. This is a great matchup. I don't think we're going to see a knockout because we know that both of these fighters aren't really knockout artists, but they have great boxing ability. And when you have two great boxers, you can see a very tactical fight. A very tactical fight, which is it's a very, very, like, I could see a fight like this in terms of being so tactical, in terms of boxing skills, like you could show, like, once it's over, assuming it would turn out the way it does, you can show a fight like this to like up and coming fighters who are training, because both of these guys are great boxers. They don't have the power in their punches that some other fighters do, but they can each take shots. Jojo Diaz has shown that he could take a shot, and he has great placement of his punches. So does Devin Haney. I'm looking forward to this matchup a lot. This is one of my favorite matchups of this year, 2021.
And it's another fight where we're looking at, fighter and father in the corner again.
Oh yeah.
I know, obviously we just had that with, obviously Teofimo Lopez, where, obviously that came out to be kind of negative. You've got, Devin Haney trained by his dad, Bill Haney, and Ben Davidson kind of helps out. Joseph Diaz has, worked his way around, several gyms in, the Southern California area, and his dad is really his main trainer, and Ben Lira, helps him out. So it'll be interesting again. Obviously, after seeing what we saw last weekend, how that works out, because, some people are for it when you've got somebody like, Papachenko. I don't think anybody can say, he's been any type of failure. But then you also see like the Teofimo Lopez performance and, some others, and, it's not, it doesn't always work out, too well. They let them in there for sometimes too long. Sometimes they pull them out, too early. Sometimes they want to be a center of attention, like Lopez Sr.
Right. I mean, we'll see. I'm just excited that a lot of these major names at the lightweight division at 135 pounds are all fighting within 7 or 8 days of each other. And then Lomachenko, if you had another week or so, week and a half or so, Lomachenko's fighting sometime towards the middle of December 11th or something like that.
Yeah, preview will be next week, yeah.
Right. So essentially, almost all the primary lightweights at 135 pounds are all fighting within 2 or 3 weeks of each other, which is great because it keeps them on the same schedule, because then we could say, oh, okay, all of these guys can realistically fight, assuming none of them get hurt so bad, and everything's okay. They can all realistically fight sometime next year because their fight schedules are parallel in a sense. Is it going to happen? Who knows? But I'm excited, man. I mean, I think everybody knows 135 pounds is one of the most exciting divisions in the sport of boxing at the moment. So, yeah, like I said, I keep going back and forth, but as of this recording, I think Jojo Diaz takes it by decision, probably split. I could change my mind tomorrow, but I think Jojo Diaz takes it by decision, split decision, as of right now.
That's a big shout. Being Haney in his backyard, I think Haney gets it on points just because
I mean, do you really consider Las Vegas being Haney's backyard? I know he lives there, but he's not really originally from there.
No, he lives there now, and I know obviously he's kind of claims that as his backyard, and I think he's technically the A side, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has a title.
The problem I've always had with Joseph Diaz is it's very rare he wins rounds convincingly, because like we touched on earlier, he seems to fight either up or down to the level of his opponent, and with him coming through as the B side, I think that he's going to need to, really, really take rounds clearly, because I think all the close rounds will go, to Devin, because he's obviously the champion. He's technically the A side. It's kind of in his backyard. So I think, those rounds, which are, really hard to split, I think they'll always go to the A side. And that'll unfortunately be the downfall for JoJo.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I could see that happening too, but I don't know. Either way, on paper, this seems like a great matchup, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And you got, I mean, we're going to touch on it in a second, but you got Gervonta Davis the next day on Sunday, a rare Sunday card at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. So from Las Vegas, you go to Staples Center, and see how that works. Also on that card, Jessica McCaskill defends her WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO, and IBO welterweight world titles against Candy Wyatt. Montana Love returns at 16-0-1 against Carlos Diaz, and Filip Hrgović goes up against Amir Armatovic. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
What's your take on Hrgović? I know we've touched on him before, but what's your overall take on him?
I think he's good. I know a lot of people, talk about him on the heavyweight scene. He struggles to get fights. Eddie Hearn said in quite a few, I think it's IFL TV interviews that, and Carla Sauerland, as well, has said this, that, I think he's looking for somebody to fight for the IBF mandatory spot. And I think they went down the top 15 opponents and nobody would fight him. So this is why I think this is for like the IBF International or something like that. But he's looking for an opponent to decide who the mandatory is going to be. And, some quite big names like Charles Martin and all these others have actually rejected fighting him. So that must be for, a reason. He looks, good, talented, big, strong. I wouldn't have said he's like a bit, a flashy boxer, but he obviously is, punches hard, and nobody wants to fight him, and that must be for a reason.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely got some heavy hands. This upcoming Sunday, the 5th of December, as we mentioned, from the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, California, on Showtime pay-per-view, Gervonta Tank Davis, 25-0, goes up against late substitution Isaac Cruz, 22-1-1. This is for Gervonta Davis's WBA regular lightweight world title. As we mentioned earlier, Rolly Romero was the original opponent, but then he had some legal troubles. So Showtime made the decision to replace him and pull him out of that event. And then Isaac Cruz fights under the Manny Pacquiao Promotions banner. He's been shown a lot with Sean Gibbons, who is the president of Manny Pacquiao Promotions. Isaac Cruz is actually shorter than Tank Davis, which is very, very rare because Tank Davis is a very short guy. He packs a punch. He can fight. He hurts people. But yeah, Isaac Cruz is actually shorter than him. Isaac Cruz is a Mexican, so hopefully we get that Mexican flair behind his fight. But I think that this ends in a knockout, maybe within the first 5 rounds, and I think Davis takes it. Maybe they'll call out George Kambosos, since Kambosos is essentially not tied to anybody exclusively. Or maybe they won't even call out anybody. You know how Mayweather Promotions, Zenner Ellerby, and Gervonta Davis are essentially. They say, "Oh yeah, we don't call anybody else. We're the cash cow. We don't call anybody out. They call us out." Yeah, well, technically that's true. I mean, Jojo Diaz. I think Devin Haney has already mentioned it before, but Jojo Diaz has said that if he wins on Saturday, he wants Tank Davis. He has said that. And I was like, oh wow, okay. I think he knows, well, Tank Davis probably make him the most money. And Tank Davis is arguably the biggest threat at 135 pounds. What do you think about this matchup, and who do you favor?
Good matchup. Cruz has been in there with some names. He fought Diego Magdaleno a couple of fights ago, and he fought ex-world champion Francisco El Bandito Vargas last time out, which was actually...
That was at 130 pounds, though?
135, yeah.
Oh, that was a 35-pound fight?
Yeah, he beat him on points on June 19th of this year. So obviously getting that big win over ex-WBC champion, obviously got him this fight with Gervonta Davis. It's actually a good standing fight. Rolly Ramirez would have been a good fight just for the shit talking, heavy-handed.
This is a more competitive fight. I can agree with that.
I think Cruz is a better all-round boxer than Rolly. Rolly's just heavy-handed and unorthodox,
right?
In my opinion.
Right.
He shouldn't really be a world champion anyway. He lost that fight, but he was obviously the A side and managed to pick it up on points. So
right, yeah. Let's see how this goes. I do agree that it's a better competitive fight than Rolly Romero Davis was. So that's good. As a boxing fan, I think we should appreciate that. I wasn't aware that Cruz was coming off a win over
El Bandito.
Francisco Vargas. Yeah. I wasn't aware of that. So that actually makes it a little bit more interesting. I still think Davis knocks him out. I just think Davis he's one of those guys. He's like Terrence Crawford, where when he has you hurt, that killer instinct to finish the fight is real. That's real with him. Terrence Crawford, guys like that, Canelo Alvarez, they have that finishing instinct, that killer instinct. When they see that you're hurt, they finish it. So that's why, that's a marquee skill to have. So yeah, I think Cruz gets knocked out. And then, Davis goes on his way and see what happens in his next fight. I really hope they don't try to make a Rolly Romero fight again. If Rolly Romero's legal troubles in some reason or another end up going away and, no charges filed in terms of that whole situation, I don't think anybody wants to see Davis and Rolly Romero fight. Nobody wants to see that, and then this is also a pay-per-view fight. So it's very interesting.
Another one.
Right. Exactly. There's been a lot of pay-per-view fights the last couple of months, the whole year, but the last couple of months. It's also going to be interesting to see how this performs. I think they were already going to have a tough time with Rolly Romero because Rolly Romero is not known. He's not known.
He just sells though because of his mouth.
Yeah, but even that, it doesn't. This is going to be a tough one. If he hits 200,000 buys, that's actually very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, because he's done it literally on his name recognition alone.
Right. So, and then he's shown, a lot of celebrities have shown to come out to his fights, like in Atlanta, and now they're in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So there could be a lot of celebrities who show up to this fight in Staples Center.
You think we'll get LeBron James? And
I don't know. No, LeBron James is actually, he's having some issues with COVID currently. So from what I've read. So yeah, even if he was planning on attending, I'm sure he's not going to attend now. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how everything turns out. But like I said, big weekend of lightweight fights, especially in the last couple of weeks. Going to be an excellent.
Jesse Vargas will be there.
Jesse Vargas will probably be there. Yeah, Jesse Vargas will probably be there. Moving on that card, Sebastian Fundora, the 6'6" welterweight fighter, 17-0-1, goes up against Sergio Garcia, 33-0. This is actually a good fight. It's a good fight. What do you think? What's your take?
It's one of those sneaky good fights because Fundora, like we've said multiple times, is for someone his height doesn't really use his advantages. He's got a long reach, big height. You think he would literally just box on the outside, but he said before in one of those like PBC side shoulder programming that when he started to box, he was an inside fighter, and then he just had like a crazy growth spurt. So he'd kind of already built up his style where he actually boxes from the inside. So it's a good fight. People may recognize Sergio Garcia because he actually fought and beat Ted Cheeseman, fought Sergey Brabchenko. I'm trying to see anyone else of note on his resume. Not really, but yeah, he was the one that fought Ted Cheeseman when Ted Cheeseman went in there, and he had all those. He's kind of on like a bit of a run for Matchroom, and then just got smoked by Garcia. He went in there and with all those betting problems and stuff like that, and just got smoked. So it's a good fight. Sergio Garcia is a decent fighter. Fundora's a fun fighter to watch. I think it's probably behind Davis, probably knocking out Cruz. It's probably the second best fight on the card.
Yeah, I think I could agree with that. Well, yeah, maybe. Because then you also have, also on the card, Sergey Derevchenko, 13-3, goes up against Carlos Adames, 20-1. This is actually a pretty decent matchup as well.
Yeah, Derevchenko is good. He suits his nickname, the Technician.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was in there with Charlo not too long ago.
And Charlo even admitted after that fight, he was like, this guy's good.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize. He's actually on lost 3 of his last 4. Charlo, Triple G, he beat Jack Kulkai and lost to Danny Jacobs.
But they were all like, he had really good, he had moments in each of those losses though.
And they were all world title fights. IBF title fight against Jacobs, IBF and IBO against Triple G, and obviously the WBC when he fought Charlo.
Right. So, I mean, he's shown even in losses that it's hard to stop him. It's hard to really beat him convincingly. So Derevchenko's still dangerous. He has that he's Ukrainian, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He has that Russian Ukrainian pedigree that a lot of those fighters have from that region. So this is actually, it's a really good card. It's got some decent matchups. So
it's an interesting matchup because when Adames lost his one fight, I was there. It's when he fought Patrick Teixeira, and he just couldn't handle the amount of punches that Teixeira throws. The conditioning and the punches in bunches that really just kind of put him off. Whereas Derevchenko isn't really like that. He doesn't waste a lot. He doesn't throw a lot. Which is why, he's the technician. He lands pretty much everything that he throws. So it would be a better stylistic matchup for Adames. But I still see, if Derevchenko has anything left, I see him winning it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Rounding off this week's episode, news and notes. Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Williams has been rescheduled for January 29th. It was originally supposed to take place on December 11th. What's your take on this potential matchup at the beginning of the year?
It would have been a good matchup, obviously, for Boxer on Sky Sports. I think it was their, big one to round the year off after losing Matchroom. Unfortunately, Liam Williams had a reoccurrence of a shoulder injury, which is why they've put it back to the end of January. Obviously, Coppinger broke the news and ended up, nobody said anything for a long time. And, Coppinger was getting a lot of shit because, it wasn't official. And then eventually when it ended up being official, Coppinger kind of posted like, like I told you guys. So
that's what happens in the boxing game. That's what happens.
Yeah, it's a good fight for the British fans, big British dust up to start the year. It's disappointing we didn't get it, in 2 weeks' time.
Right.
But, it's... we'll get it eventually.
It's around the corner. It's still pretty close. You talk about big British fight, British dust up. It's happening after all these years. I believe I saw something along the lines of they first faced off sometime in 2011, I believe. And now they are fighting. That's right. The world awaits. Amir King Khan and Kel Special K Brook is finally official for February 19, 2022. After years and years of all this talk between both of them, back and forth, they will finally square off in the ring in February 2022. I saw like a nice tidbit that said that because people were saying, oh, these guys are over the hill, they're done. Mayweather and Pacquiao were both older than them when they fought. both of these guys are younger. I'm hoping, people are still going to watch. Even the people who are talking smack about it, they're still going to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably going to do pretty well in the UK, right?
Interesting to see, what it does in terms of numbers, because Eddie's kind of said, hey, I think Sky and Boxer gave them an offer. I believe Khan-Brook's dad, who is his manager, turned up at a DAZN event and told Eddie, hey, this is what they've offered us. If you match it, we'll come with you. And Eddie just sort of said, nah, I don't think it's gonna, do that well. The purses that they want combined was just too much. But I could see it doing around 200, something like that.
Really?
I'm sure it's going to be like $20. I think
20 pounds.
Yeah, sorry, 20 pounds. My bad. I lived over here for too long.
Yep.
In terms of the fight, I think that they're both over the hill, but they're both over the hill. So it's kind of fair, right? If it's when they fought Crawford, you've got Crawford pretty much at his peak. Khan's on the other side. He gets smoked. Khan-Brook fights Khan, gets knocked out by a jab. So it's really just what do they have left? Obviously Khan's relied on his reflexes and his speed for so long. Khan-Brook, very similar. Very two of my favorite British fighters. Obviously, I kind of grew up when these two were kind of hitting the prime. I remember watching Amir Khan in the Olympics.
Right.
And then obviously I remember, Khan-Brook coming over, kind of coming through the scene when I was kind of watching boxing to begin with. And then he came over here, beat Sean Porter, and then kind of wasted his career after that. Obviously fought Errol Spence and Triple G, and they didn't go too well for him. That kind of ruined his career, to be honest with you, getting his orbital broken twice.
But you can't say that Khan-Brook shied away from a lot of these major players in these divisions.
But I think he should have fought more. Like, he had that period when he was fighting, was it Kevin Bazier and these other names?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
When he'd won. And I don't know whether it's because, maybe people on this side of the pond had, heard how good Khan-Brook was because people knew how good Porter was. And
well, that's why.
Was it people just didn't want to fight him? And then he had to take those, outlandish fights, like fighting Triple G, out of his own weight category, and then fighting Errol Spence. I'm sure those were by far the two biggest fights and the two biggest purses that Khan-Brook's ever had, and I'm sure he's dined out on those for the rest of his career.
Right.
But this is going to be an interesting fight because it's really like, what do they both have left? And I'm sure whoever loses probably rides off into the sunset with a nice payday, and I'm sure whoever wins will probably have
ride
one
off
more
into
fight.
The sunset. They might both ride off to the sunset. Doesn't really matter.
I could see if Khan-Brook wins, Khan-Brook fights Conor Benn. If Amir Khan wins, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go off on one here. If Amir Khan wins, Amir Khan fights Manny Pacquiao in Dubai.
Oh, you know what? I think that's highly likely.
He loses the election because he's like third or fourth or whatever it is at the minute.
Right.
He comes back, fights Amir Khan in Dubai because of Amir Khan's, Muslim.
You know what?
Fan base.
I think you're right.
And he's not going to get hurt fighting Khan because he doesn't have any pop.
I think you're right. I think I could see that happening. I really could. Yeah, I could totally see that. Oh, you heard it here first, people. If Khan wins, you're going to see a Pacquiao-Khan matchup in the Middle East somewhere, Dubai, most likely.
You're welcome, Sean Gibbons.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah, big time. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of The Last Round. We were a little late in recording and putting it out this week, so we apologize. But we have it out for you for all this weekend's previews of fights and news and notes and reviews of the last week's fights. So before we completely sign off, once again, Mike, go ahead and let our fans and followers and listeners know where they can find us and follow us.
We're at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And for anybody that's been looking at our Instagram, we're trying to come to the problem of why it won't let us post any text below the pictures. We've reported it to Instagram several times with no response.
We don't know what's going on with it either.
We reported it around 10 times, so I'm not too sure why it's not letting us post. But we keep posting the posters, and we'll eventually, hopefully, get back with being able to post, text and underneath. But be sure to join us next week. There's actually quite a lot to preview. We've got Joe Real Casimir against Paul Butler. Nonito Donaire is back against Rima Gabiayo. Vasyl Lomachenko is back against Richard Comey. Dmitry Bivol against Umar Salamov. And Conor Benn is fighting Chris Algieri.
The clock never stops in the boxing world. So for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round